All right. Hello, and welcome to Left of the Projector. I'm your host, Evan, and we are back again this week discussing Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. And back again on the podcast, I have Companero Cruz and Ivan. Thank you both for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Evan.
Thank you again, Evan.
Of course, glad to have you both. We were discussing this movie a little bit, I guess, before this, and the movie's been out for a little while now, and then it's gotten some critical acclaim. It did very well, or it didn't do very well in the box office, primarily because it was kind of a straight to Netflix type of situation. I don't think it was even in the box office very much. But just kind of your overall impressions of the movie. Would you recommend it? What's your before we kind of get into the plot and
I
some of
would
the
say,
themes?
like just even if you ignore the story, which is fantastic, just aesthetic alone makes it worth watching. The all the intricate details within each of not only the settings but the characters themselves is well worth taking not even 2 hours to check it out.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ivan.
No, I was just gonna say I liked it a lot. I think aesthetically, it's pretty crazy what they were able to do. All the artists and I don't know, animators. I don't even know the word for stop motion. Photographers involved in all that. Um, I think in terms of like a retelling of a fairy tale, and I don't even really want to say modern sense because it doesn't take place in what we consider modern times, but I think it's a pretty interesting retelling, and just overall, it's like just as a film, I thought the humor was appropriate for what they were trying to do. I don't know, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's you mentioned the backdrop of the time. So the Pinocchio original sort of musical version took place during the same era, kind of World War I to World War II time frame a little bit further. But I think just like most of Del Toro's movies, a lot of them, he gives you the historical backdrop, which I think
Mhm.
frames his movies so much in a much more interesting way than just kind of it just be simpling the story. The historical nod starting around World War I and going through. I don't think it goes through the end of World War II until kind of like the future kind of pieces as it
Mhm.
flashes forward. But I think I don't know. Did you? I mean, obviously this movie isn't about history, but it like has that historical thing. But
I mean,
I think
Mussolini's in it, so it's pretty obvious. Like there's certain themes that appear throughout the movie.
Yeah, I think all that, sort of the whole plot of the movie being a telling of or an examination on the relationships of males, particularly the father and the son relationship, and how it's coinciding in the background of a fascist dictatorship, and how fascism affects men of all ages, grown men, young men, little boys. And I think it's really interesting. I'm excited to get into it here.
yeah, I was just saying to Cruz before, I think right before you came on, is that I think that piece we'll probably talk about when we get into some of the characters, especially. But I feel like they really did a good job of kind of having like the compare and contrast of the Podesta, sort of like the town military leader, sort of in the World War II era Italy, and his son Candlewick versus like the Geppetto and
Mhm.
Pinocchio relationship. They really they built more of a feelings among the characters than I feel like the previous tellings of this story too. Not even close. I mean,
I personally, one thing I do find funny is this came out as well around the same time that they did a Pinocchio live action, like for the Disney.
yes.
And when I was initially looking up reviews for Pinocchio, like after I had watched it to see what other people thought, it was a bunch of people thinking that this was the Disney version. And they were like review bombing this, like it has nothing to do with
If
there's
only.
where's all the magic in the singing? Where's Jiminy Cricket?
Well,
or
it's
like
funny, it's funny.
or not Jiminy because I think Jiminy Cricket was in this. It's he said, "Where's all the songs?"
Sebastian
And
J. Cricket or whatever.
Yeah. Where's the music? The laughter.
where's the joy? Why is everyone
It's
so sad?
funny
There's
that you guys
bombs
say
going on.
It's funny that you bring that up because when I was gonna watch this movie earlier, I autopilot opened up Disney Plus and started typing
Mhm.
in Pinocchio, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not the right guy.
Yeah, I mean, intentionally, like a number of Del Toro's movies have his name kind of like in the title. Like there's another one that I saw before that I forget what I'm blanking on what it was. But it's intent. I mean, it's obviously he wants to make sure that people, one, are discerning the his telling of the story versus kind of like the general Pinocchio story. And I think we don't need to. It's been a while since I've seen the original, so we don't really have to
Yeah.
talk about that. But I think the opening of the story, you immediately are immersed with the truly amazing cinematographic, whatever the term is, for all of the characters, the backgrounds, the landscapes. Like I just, it's like my mind is just blown away at what they did. And so you have Geppetto, which is kind of like the initial protagonist before, the a little bit into the film, but you have him talking about Carlo, his son.
Mhm.
And I think you really get a sense of, just kind of like local life in a small town in Italy during, at this time it's 1916 or 1917 or so, beginning of World War One, and they build that initial world for you, and it's just pretty
It
great.
does a really great job at very quickly and efficiently showing you what the culture's like, what the beliefs of the town are, relationships between the adults and the kids, and then also relationship between the people and the church. Because like the first thing you see them really doing is they're working on the Jesus statue, um, which then of course the war destroys.
Yeah, I think showing the church really brought I think you're right. It, like, brings to life probably what a town in anywhere. They don't ever say where in Italy. It doesn't. I guess they do later. They do talk about. Do they?
I can't remember if they give like a specific town, but
Yeah,
No.
I'm sure someone can narrow down what part of the
Yeah.
countryside they're in.
it's in the mountains of Italy, which that could be just about anywhere.
Right.
But yeah, like the giving the kind of the showing like the father and son Carlo sort of like love for each other and wanting to do things together and all of these things. And like you said, he's building the Christ for the church, and they really show the relationship between sort of the town within and all the people. Like they're walking into town, and like all the different people are greeting them as they're going in. Everyone sort of knows each other as this small little town. And then they're definitely the little foreshadowing of like the airplanes flying over top.
Mhm.
As you know, this is war. And I think pretty early on, I think the Geppetto tells Carlo, I think he even uses the phrase "war is hell," which is, a often quoted line to say, to just kind of show you the backdrop
Like this is
of really
not good.
everything.
Like
Yeah,
we
this is
we,
going
we
to
don't
suck.
support war. Is
Right.
essentially
One thing I noticed, I don't know, I want to see if you guys picked up on this, was whenever Geppetto, whether it's Geppetto Carlo or Geppetto and Pinocchio, are at the church, not only this applies to the Jesus on the cross, but also the statues outside of the church do not have the same sort of caricatured look that the rest of the characters have. Like all the other characters, they have this very like way over exaggerated facial features, especially Geppetto, and like, crazy hair or whatever. But the statues in front of the church have that very like, I don't want to, decadent might be the wrong word, but like a chiseled jawline, all like the perfect angles. And it kind of reminded me of like how a lot of fascists will use sort of that Greek or Roman imagery to promote their ideal man. And I just
Mhm.
thought in the beginning that was a really interesting foreshadowing to what we know happened in history. And then during the sections that take place during the Second World War, to see that kind of architecture around the city.
Yeah, I did not catch I do know what you're talking about with the sculptures, but I didn't put those kind of things. But you're right, they do have this very set way of looking at the ideal human race kind of aspect, which again, even though it's World War One, it's still relevant.
Those tendencies are appearing, or even at that point.
Yeah, I mean, everything being the fact that it's built in this stop motion, everything is crafted so perfectly. It had to have been like it was clearly a conscious choice as they're doing it to juxtapose the.
That's sort of the beauty of not only animation, but especially stop motion animation, is because of how much work goes into making every little detail. Like if it's there, it's there for a purpose. It's there to symbolize something, or to make it more real. Whereas live action stuff can just be there to be there, or someone left it on set or something.
Yeah.
Right, like were the curtains really supposed to be blue?
Yeah,
like,
was it a conscious choice that they were blue? Just, they had blue curtains.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And the sort of the sketching from there is you sort of have Geppetto's building the Christ statue, and you have them going back and forth. And then you do have, I think, right before you get to the point where the bombs drop accidentally, killing Carlo, you have the character, which in the original is Jiminy Cricket, but in this it's Sebastian Cricket. And it sort of surprised me the way that they kind of melded that character in. I thought it was kind of cool that it's like this little cricket that's writing his memoir. He's joking about like all the things he's done in his life. I think it's like like the comic relief in some sense.
I think he was my favorite character. I don't know why. I think I really liked his voice. So whenever he was talking, it was just funny to me.
Yeah, he's got a really good narration voice.
Yeah, it's exactly. Who is the voice? It's it's Ewan McGregor.
Oh, I thought so. Yeah. Okay.
Kenobi is what.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you're right. I think that the movie, I feel like, isn't what I would call funny, but it's like has its humorous aspects to it that, like, it's sort of like a child wonderment. Is that a word? Child wondering. I don't. Those are words.
No, but I get what you're trying to say, though. I don't know, like, not to like hard disagree, but I did find it funny, whether it's supposed to be, supposed to be a comedy or not. But I can see how, a child watching it, or like, families watching it, whatever, like when a child would laugh, because I'm basically just a big child, and every time Sebastian got mushed, I giggled because I don't know, I just thought that was funny. But also, like, sort of jokes that aren't really jokes, and I'm probably getting way too ahead of myself, but like, we got to talk about Mussolini at some point.
Oh yeah,
of course.
Yes,
right. And it's the fact that everyone has like this, whimsical voice, or has sort of like this air of fantasy, and he's just like a dude, and he's just like, I don't like it, like an Italian wannabe, which I feel like a lot of people probably would have described Mussolini back in the day as an Italian wannabe.
Yeah, no, I wrote something down too about his demeanor. Also, just the way he looks is also different from the other characters. But the thing that's like, I guess what sets it off in motion, like the Pinocchio aspect of it, is we're introduced to Sebastian Cricket, and he, at the same time, it's also right after the bomb had dropped, and Geppetto is now like distraught by the death of his son, as one would clearly be, and he's drunk, and he starts creating Pinocchio, the doll, or the puppet,
chops down
the tree that Cricket's in, and no matter how many things fell on that little cricket, he's a survivor. It's quite that I did find very funny throughout that. It's like, no matter what fell on him, he survived. And then you have the sort of the forest spirits that bring about life to both Pinocchio and then Sebastian, allowing him to talk to the rest of the people. And I think it's interesting how, I don't know what you thought of this, maybe it's kind of like a throwaway thing, but the idea that Sebastian is given this task to like be his sort of like caretaker in exchange for like this wish, which obviously comes into play later. But I wanted to like think of it beyond just being like a plot device. I don't, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I think it's interesting that it's almost like they didn't trust that he needed some conscience beyond his father or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it was just a plot point, because I think if it was, he would have been a lot more of like my reward throughout the entire movie, and he really wasn't.
No.
I think not Jimmy G, Sebastian himself, like, we don't know, how much of his stories are true or not, especially in the beginning when he's like, I'm gonna write my memoirs because I did this, that, and the third, and we're only just getting it from him. So, it could be what they're trying to say is, to care for family, to try to have a community, to care for, in this case, maybe even a surrogate son. It's just supposed to be a lot more fulfilling in your life. Ultimately, I mean, he chose what he did at the end, for the boy, and threw away, his chance.
Yeah. And the other theme that I think comes up to right around the time that Pinocchio is now alive and he's kind of like walking around the house that they're living in, is the idea about like obeying, which I think comes throughout the entire movie, which I think is the perfect backdrop for like the fascist Italian, party later on in sort of the second half of the movie. But it's very, I don't know what you thought about the having to obey versus kind of like being your own person.
I was going to say I was thinking like kind of the idea of developing individuality in a fascist society that demands that you obey, and in a way that is mirrored by Geppetto. Because he didn't make Pinocchio, he was trying to make Carlo.
Right.
So even him, even though there's like some kind of good intention, and he's not necessarily a fascist, he's still trying to mold a very specific person. And when he encounters Pinocchio when he's first alive, and Pinocchio's his own person, he's very upset by it. He doesn't respond to it very well. And then later on in the film, when they like are trying to hammer in that fascist war machine ideology, it's just another attempt to get him to stop being him.
Yeah.
I just thought about this.
The mold.
This fitting the mold and obeying. Like, Geppetto, not that he, I think, blamed Carlo. I mean, at least we don't know for what happened, but Carlo did turn around and run back into the church on his own volition as his own individual. And that, not that it was Carlo's fault either, but like, if he just hadn't gone and done that, if he had just listened or just stayed in line, maybe he wouldn't have died. So anybody who is breaking the norm or the mold or trying to do their own thing, like you said, in a fascist society, that doesn't fly.
But part of why he ran back because he had lost his perfect pine cone, which I thought was also interesting too, because he had to choose a different one because it wasn't like wasn't perfect. And two, I feel like there is this idea also of Geppetto of like the needing to strive for some kind of perfection. Maybe as an artist, as a woodworker or whatever, as a craftsman, like you are trying to achieve like a perfect.
Which ties into like the statues you mentioned. They were like perfectly chiseled, shaped in the way of like the idealized person, and then of course the fascist party trying to make the perfect person essentially in their mind.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
It's almost like there's that strive for perfection that Carlo had been kind of instilled was what unfortunately led to his death, even if it had been like an accident, accidental. But they were just like dropping the bomb to get rid of it off. It's like
they're probably just too heavy, and they're just like, who cares?
Yeah, what's
yeah, that's crazy.
What's a village church that just, but it only seemed to have like blew a hole like just in like the roof of the church, like in a perfect spot. I know it's just
It just
just
landed perfectly on where Carlo was.
So the moral of the
Yeah.
movie is perfection is bad.
Yeah, right. And so we kind of like fast forward to, the World War II era. I think they said it was 1916 at the beginning, and then it's 20 years later, so it's 1936. Kind of the
Yeah,
early
that's what I
stages of
figured.
the World War II, and they don't say too much about it. They just kind of have characters like the
Mhm.
Podesta in the town. And one thing I think I mentioned to both of you that I noticed when he goes into town with Pinocchio for the first time to go to the church, there's the sign up that has the Italian slogan, which was to believe, to obey, to fight. Like
Mhm.
the slogan. I think they easily could have just not done that, but knowing that this entire set is so perfectly designed, and the logo was exactly the same as like the actual logo that they had used. So I thought that was a cool little.
The town, like the lighting in general, is a lot darker,
Yes.
far less vibrant, much more devoid of color. Um, you get into the church, and the church is full. Like, everyone's there. Everyone is following everything to a T. And then the fascist party's also there, making sure that they're doing that.
Right,
Very nice.
exactly. And it's like we were saying in the beginning, how you were very much introduced right away. This is the values of this village or town. This is what they believe in. This is what it means to be a good citizen. And as soon as we make that transition, like you were saying, Evan, like you see that the fascist logo like immediately, and you see the Podestas around town. You even Geppetto makes a comment when Pinocchio's doing what he's doing, when he yells at the Podesta. He says nobody talks to the Podesta like that. Like, even though no one is really outrightly saying like, oh shit, those fascists are bad. Like, everybody in the village knows what's going on. Even Geppetto, as much as he is a drunk or lost his mind at that point in the movie or whatever.
Yeah, they still have that voice, and they're telling them that they have to obey
Mm-hmm.
the rules or it's bad. And I think it was interesting too that they used when they see that Pinocchio is like an alive, not like an actual puppet. And they call him they call or they say Geppetto is doing witchcraft
Yeah.
and everything. And I thought that was interesting because you typically don't think of, I mean, in my mind, I don't think of like witchcraft as being an accusatory thing at this point in history, but I don't know. Maybe I just don't know as much about how it would have been thrown around in like
Well, I
the
guess with the hyper Christianity and things like
true.
that, anything outside of the religion or what would be seen in, say, like the Bible or whatever, would be heresy and witchcraft.
Yeah, that's true. I think they said demon too, right? They
Yeah,
call him a
I'm pretty sure
demon.
it's a
Yeah,
demon.
Yeah, they're really like, I think the other term that they use is they said he's an abomination. I think the priest calls it an abomination. And so it's very clear that this boy who is not obeying and thinking for himself is an abomination, even though they're saying it in the sense because he's a living puppet.
Right, there's a
It's
double meaning there.
yeah,
right,
that's I
right.
took it to mean that, yeah.
And then it is interesting, that all these churchgoers and the priest himself, they're calling, Pinocchio witchcraft or demon or whatever. But meanwhile, this whole fascist state has moved in, and if you were to take, this, as I've talked to both of you guys about this outside of the podcast, if you were to take the teaching of Christ or the church uh, more literally. All that stuff, like fascism, the supremacy, like there's a no go. But
Mhm.
none of these people are willing to take a stand. Or maybe
Because
they
they're scared.
have, we haven't seen that, and they've been beaten down, except for Pinocchio.
And
Yeah.
it's
Oh, go
funny
ahead.
because it's like Pinocchio he's just born and he's like, oh, cool, I'm going to be a person. And they're like, excuse me, I don't think so.
Well, that actually goes into, and stop me, Evan, if I'm going too far, but
Oh no,
that goes
please.
into Candlewick. because he repeats the things that his father has probably literally beaten into him.
Mm-hmm.
And all Pinocchio has to do is cry at him a little bit for Candlewick to kind of. Did I call him Candlejack? I meant to call him Candlewick. For Candlewick to open up and basically say, like, I'm doing this because I want my father to like me. I don't actually really believe in any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that contrasts with Pinocchio basically being a newborn and showing that Pinocchio and Candlejack and anybody in society has to be taught fascism. They have to be taught racism or white supremacy or supremacy of religion. Nobody is born with hate. Nobody is born with these desires to like all the Nazis, all the Italian fascists who did these terrible atrocities just weren't born like that. You have to teach people how to be that way. You have to obey to become that way.
Right. And as you said, like Pinocchio is born unaware of these ideas or like these views of people because he hasn't been, as you said, like quote unquote taught any of these things. He's kind of like I think you said like he's a newborn. He's like a child that's just untainted. Maybe that's not the right word. Like untouched.
He's pure. Yeah.
Pure. Yeah. Yeah. And well, I don't think it was too far to mention the Podesta and the son, because the next note that I had too was I think the Podesta demands that, or I think he wants Pinocchio to join like the model fascist youth.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were like pretty explicit in this movie about joining the fascist party and everything. It's not like just kind of like slide it in there. Like
Pinocchio has no discipline and he needs to be taught discipline, and clearly Geppetto is not capable of, because he's weak. He's a drunk, not the strong man.
Yeah, I almost took. They didn't say this exactly, but I almost took it to mean, even though Geppetto is building them the Christ statue for the church, I almost seem like when they called him like a demon and a witchcraft, is that he's kind of like a godless person, and so he doesn't like fit into the mold of the, do the religion, do the fascism. He's just kind of like
he also
his own
lost.
guy.
He suffered a very intense tragedy, which is often, if you were a religious person, something like that will cause people to lose their religions. And
true.
So no matter where he started, he likely wouldn't be following it by that point. And as fascism takes hold, that's a no-no. They're trying to maintain that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Geppetto ever really lost it, because there's one line when right before he chops down the tree, he says into the air, "Why don't you listen to my prayers?"
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
like he's been trying, for
that question of religion
to do what he thought he was supposed to do, and he probably prior to Carlo's death and during Carlo's life, regardless if he was a godless person or he outright believed or was fanatic, whatever, he seems like the kind of person who just tried to do good. And I think that's reflected in like what the townspeople say about him. Like they say he's a model citizen, he's a good father, he's done everything right except love his son. And loving his son had led him to have the greatest pain.
Yeah.
He obeyed and it did not work out for him.
Right.
Yeah. Well, not to go past that, but we're taught in kind of going to the one of the notes I wrote down. I don't know where this exactly comes in. So it's right after the Podesta. They go back to. I think it's when they go back to Geppetto's house, and this is when like they're drinking hot chocolate, and the Pinocchio like burns his legs off because the Candlewick's like a dick and is telling him to stick his feet into the fire. But I wrote down, I don't know if this was a line or if I just wrote it down. It's that there's sort of like these imperfect fathers and imperfect sons, maybe the Sebastian says that line. I'm not sure. There's sort of like there's these, there's this, even though Geppetto, all the fathers and all the sons have like this imperfection related to them, and they have to learn these things. And I mean, I don't think the Podesta ever learns. He dies a piece of shit. But even like Candlewick has like this understanding of realization later too, which I think is pretty cool. And so I think it's a. I know what the other quote I wrote down there was that people are afraid of the things that they don't know, and I think that the idea of Pinocchio is so foreign to these fascists. I think that's what also makes the fascism in the background so perfect, is that if this had just been like America and Pinocchio is born, or just like random indistinct Europe, like a neutral background, I don't feel like it has the same weight
Yeah, the
of
setting plays a huge part in how this even works in the first place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if it was just Pinocchio in New York City, I don't think it would really have the same
Pinocchio
effect.
takes Manhattan.
Right. Like, no, I think you need to have the contrast of the developing and, at the time, current fascist dictatorship to really bring it all back full circle. Because, again, you have this pure boy who is basically questioning the entire society around him, and everyone else is just obeying. Everyone else is trying to be something they're not. And I think that, I've talked about this before, but I think that is one of the fundamental issues with, well, there's a lot of fundamental issues with fascism, but the primary,
we don't have time for them all here.
Right. The primary crux of what's wrong with fascism is that it's a scam. It's a scheme. You basically, or I've said it before, it's a con job. You convince a group of people that if they just do X, Y, and Z, they can have their old life back. We saw it in Germany. We saw it in Italy. We are starting to see it in the United States. And Geppetto himself, is trying to get back to this old life that he used to have. I don't think, it's not really explored that, how did Geppetto feel, about the fascists? Is he going to join them, or sympathetic? I don't think so, and I don't think we really need to know that for the sake of the plot. But that kind of nostalgia for a life previous is what a lot of the fascist ideology is built on. And if you didn't have this story taking place in either Italy or Nazi Germany, I wouldn't have the same effect.
Yeah, no. And one other thing that I was thinking about too, and I think it's a lot happens in that scene in the house. The one thing that they also harp on, the Podesta harps on, and it goes back to the fascism thing and the obeying, is that he is surprised by the fact that he is like a puppet without strings. And I think that like literally is the idea that he wishes he had strings because he could actually treat him like a puppet. I think he uses the word that he's an independent thinker, is that Pinocchio is an independent thinker, and that's bad for their brand. That's bad. That's off brand for the fascists.
Yeah, it's when the Podesta wants him to go to the school.
Yes.
And he says, and he didn't show up to school that day. And he's like, I don't remember what the first line he said was, but he says something, and he goes, well, maybe an independent thinker.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't do that.
Right.
Yeah, much like woodworking, Pinocchio, or even the Christ statue, everything under fascism has to be perfectly crafted, and anything that falls out of place has to constantly be hammered back into place. And Pinocchio, very much, no matter what you do, is just always going to be himself.
Yeah. And then, so this is sort of like where I don't want to say it like diverts the plot, but as he's attempting to go to school, he's discovered by like what I didn't realize, the Spazzatura, the monkey. Is it a monkey?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's like, I think it's a monkey.
The voice for that is Kate Blanchett, which like I don't know that I ever would have been able to write. Like it doesn't really say many words.
I would not have.
I only knew that because I looked it up. But so then you have that, and then you have the what do you call it? What's the guy's name? Count Volpe, which is sort of like the leader of this circus, which is voiced by Christopher Waltz, which is also
Perfect.
like, yeah, the voice of that is perfect. And it's sort of like that. I don't want to say it like diverts it, but it creates this sort of different little arc of this new, like I almost pictured or viewed like the little circus within there as sort of like this like sub fascist sort of little dictatorship that he was running, because he was, exploiting his workers, he was withholding money, doing all these things, and he makes him sign this contract for like the rest of his life basically. And it's I don't know what you guys thought of that.
I mean,
Yeah, for sure. I think, at least in my opinion, it's a little bit more appropriate to say that the Count was a lot more of just like any old capitalist.
Yeah,
He
that's
doesn't
probably right.
really like ever say like, oh, I have a political ideology or I believe in this or that. What he believes in is money. I mean, and then he immediately sees the wonder that is Pinocchio. He moves to take advantage of it, forces him to sign a contract he doesn't understand, abuses Spazzatura, I think is the monkey's
Yeah,
name.
Spazzatura.
Doesn't send any money back to Geppetto, um, all off of the profits that Pinocchio drags in. And then when Mussolini is in town, he wants to show Mussolini, the show or whatever, because he wants to be in the favors of the fascists, so he can keep doing what he can do, which is make money. And I realize I did say that he never really explicitly says what he does believe in. He does, he does do, I don't want to say the Hitler salute, but the fascist salute.
Yeah.
A few times, and he has the flags and stuff or whatever. But I very much get the sense that, if he didn't meet his end and was still doing, his show, once the Americans showed up, he probably would have turned right around and been like, "Oh, my friend."
He was an opportunist.
Right. Exactly.
So one thing, when they first come into town, like when that circus first comes into town, you see the monkey roll out like the banner, and it covers the fascist symbol. That's right. The art on the wall.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Which, for me, what that is he himself would probably never call himself a fascist. He probably wouldn't get political, but because fascism benefits him and allows him to do what he's doing, he, like you said, he wants to be in their favor. But if fascism falls, he's going to switch sides and be like, oh yeah, liberalism, America, let's go.
Yeah,
let's do some privatizing.
Yeah, the only people he wouldn't like is if the communists or socialists took power, because they would not let him do this.
No.
No. Yeah. Yeah. The whole circus thing I think is funny, and that was when you get one of the times that Sebastian is crushed by the book that he is given by his dad. And I think too that one line that I missed, I don't know exactly when it happens, if it's when he's leaving or it's after he joins the circus at first, or he doesn't join, he like is kind of coerced, is that the father says that he is like being a burden and he wants him to be more like his son. And I think it's said in hatred, but I think that it's more like in grief. Like Geppetto is still sad by the fact that his son had died. And so I think it does play a part in that the entire time Pinocchio is like trying to please his father and like he thinks like joining the circus might help, or whatever. Later he joins
or something.
Yeah.
Some kind of structure is really good. It's just he feels like he needs the structure.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly needs education. There's nothing wrong with that, but maybe not the fascist youth of Italy.
Maybe we can do a different one,
Right.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of Mussolini as a character?
Yeah. So, well, just I guess the only thing that happens really before that is that he's now off on tour with not Mussolini, with the Count Volpe, because he needs to like earn enough money to send back to his father to get him out of this contract. And I thought it was pretty also right before that is that Spazzatura agrees with Pinocchio to make a fool out of that particular performance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they knew it was so important to him. And I think using Mussolini here, in my perspective, it was very. I'm trying to think of how I would say this. Or you, why don't you go first, and I'll say. Putting my thoughts together. I like that they humiliated him. That's that.
Yeah, they're humiliating him because it's a strike at power. Even if you have respect for the power, respect for the authority, or whatever, you're still being controlled. And like with Pinocchio, like at one point, he's literally on strings. Like he is being controlled. They're all being controlled. But even to get that slight amount of humiliation into them probably feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you take the different layers of a fascist society, like the fascist government, the regular people, opportunist capitalists, fascism, like we keep saying in the stream, like fascism has to be perfect, but fascism really just has to give the illusion of perfection.
Right.
And as we study now, fascist societies are not homogeneous. They are not united. There is consistent infighting. We can look at Hitler's regime. We can look at Mussolini's regime. It's all people jockeying for power. So in this sort of microcosm, you have Pinocchio and Spazzatura, being sort of the regular workers, deciding, we're gonna clap back, we're gonna, stick it to them. And from Mussolini's perspective, who doesn't know that was the plot, all he's seeing is the Count has made this show to basically make fun of him. And it shows that no matter what kind of iron grip you're trying to hold on people, you're never going to have that unity. There's always going to be something that slips through the cracks. And what is Mussolini's reaction to it? Shoot him.
Yeah, and they have to, in order to maintain that illusion, they have to be extremely strict. They cannot allow something like that to slide, because if one slides, then everyone starts doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the need for the control. I think it's also funny. I think it's also funny that they're like joking. They're like changing of the plot of the little musical was like I don't want to say infantile, like very childish potty humor. I don't know. I think it was the perfect, because they didn't necessarily make fun of fascism or Italy. They were just making like poop and pee jokes, and it was like the humiliation to him as well, which I appreciated. It was like its own jab at, like, you can't control us all the time. Like, we can still think for ourselves.
Exactly. And fascism is always against what they call degeneracy. How more degenerate can you get? I'm talking about piss and shit. So, you just start talking about that, and it goes to show that, again, you try to have this iron grip on people, you try to police what people say, people are still gonna laugh at poo poo and pee pee. Like you can't change that out of people.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that's also, well, you mentioned before in the way that Mussolini's character looks different than the rest of the people. I thought that was it's an observation I noticed as well. Like, they don't have him seem as interesting, and also it's the person who plays his voice was Tom Kenny, and I know that actor. I think he's like from a lot. Like, I feel like he's done a lot of comedy. What do I know him from? SpongeBob. Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. So it's almost, I don't know if like how they chose or how he chose who the person who would be his voice, but that almost like makes it even funnier.
Yeah, I thought it was Tom Kenny, but I was like, he only had like what, 4 lines. So
yeah, and it's kind of like mumbling too.
Yeah, but like, that's funny. I wonder if that is sort of like a commentary of like, we know Tom Kenny to be this, annoying ass sponge that has entertained people's lives for, I think, over 2 decades now. We do not imagine SpongeBob as a fascist dictator.
Yeah, That's true.
Anything,
They also
the
made him really
character
short too.
SpongeBob- Yeah, yeah.
Well, they like
made him
carry him out
tiny.
of the car. I thought was really funny.
That made me wonder: was Mussolini short? I have no idea. Now we got to find out. Because I was wondering, like, did they just like decide to do that, or was he
Mussolini's
sensitive
He
about
was
height?
5'6". No,
Okay.
wait.
Not upside down.
Right side up. Now, I can't find his height. They don't usually put that in Wikipedia unless they do.
Well, anyway, while we're looking that up, I was going to say, I wonder if that's a commentary because SpongeBob would never stand for fascism.
Oh, he was 5'6.5".
5'6.5". It's not really.
Well, you got to get that
he
half
doesn't
in there, you
believe.
know?
Yeah. his biographers wrote the half.
He gives me and my short kings a bad name. But
Yeah.
SpongeBob would never stand for that kind of stuff. He's all about his friends and his family, whatever. So we're probably way overthinking it, but
Well,
I
I mean,
remember my kids saw him and were just like, "Look at him, he's a short fat guy."
Yeah, he's just this little meatball.
Well, and then what's also interesting is that's happening like in tandem with this is when Geppetto's off to try and like find Pinocchio. He gets swallowed by the gigantic whale, and immediately I like wrote down like Jonah and the whale story, or like that whole thing. I don't know if there was like an intentional symbolism behind that aspect of this gigantic whale that only comes up. They say later, like it only comes up to surface like every once in a while, and so they needed their
Every
chance
10
to
years.
read. Yeah,
That
years.
could be a
So,
comment on fascism itself, it just kind of crops up every now and again.
oh, interesting.
And
just
say like a
everything.
subtext thing, or like just something like a subtle thing, because obviously they're pulling from just this Pinocchio story at the same time. But that's a good way to show it's like it's just something that crops up every now and again. You gotta face it and fight it, and then it'll kind of go back, disappear at some point.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But only if you fight against it. Only if you deal with it.
Right. And it could be a commentary too on sort of just the imperial powers fighting in general, and it happens, and it cycles. Like when Geppetto is talking to the captain, he says it's not a sea out there, it's a graveyard. And, I totally forgot about the whale aspect of the story, so when he was describing the beast, I kind of was thinking, oh, maybe it's like a really big warship or something like that. So when they're sailing, you can see there's active fighting happening around them.
Right.
But this whale shows up, and then everyone's kind of either they're gone or we don't talk about the fighting anymore. Now it's the immediate conflict is getting swallowed by the whale. Like it could be that fascism, capitalist forces, imperialist forces, every such and such time as is modern history, crop up and they fight and they swallow everything that gets in their way.
Yeah. Well, then
by working together, you can defeat it.
Right.
Escape as they work together.
And sort of like the punishment for Pinocchio's, I think they shoot him, and then I also enjoyed the like his sort of like the little background story of like when he is in the afterlife. The funniest part of the afterlife, I don't know if you noticed, like the rabbits that are carrying him, they like clock out in like a clock out system, and then they're like, we're off the clock now, we can like play cards. I just thought it was, or on the clock, I don't know, whatever it was. Even in the afterlife in hell, even in hell or afterlife, whatever it is, like they still have to do wage slavery.
Oh my goodness.
But I thought that was a little funny thing. But then so he comes back to life, and now he's conscripted basically into the fascist youth to go train. And what's so amazing about it's like you think of the modern military, America, whatever is, as like children, 18-year-olds going off to fight. And like in this, like they are very explicit that it's literal children.
You got to start when they are children to make them the perfect soldier to die.
That's very, again, classic fascism. The Italian fascists did that for real. Nazi Germany used children soldiers. And at the risk of us getting canceled, Groups like Azov in Ukraine have been running summer camps for children for years, since before 2014. The fascists tried to condition their youth to be a certain way, to obey, to be the perfect soldier. Again, it goes back to this illusion of perfection.
Yeah, well, and that also goes back to the idea that these things are taught. Like you can't
Yeah.
just one day come up and say like, "Oh, you guys got to go fight." Like you have to condition and break down their mental state really to believe something enough to do it. And I think what's cool about the you don't ever really see any of the other characters or the children in the like the fascist youth except for Candlewick and then Pinocchio. And I think you mentioned before is how Candlewick is like learning and like he's like in his bed like to tears because he realizes all the things he's doing are not as an individual of someone who can think for themselves, but he's just obeying whatever his father says and has that like epiphany when they're at the top of the little tower and their little paintball military. I'm surprised they didn't actually use real bullets during their little
I know, but I thought the same thing, but I'm sure they probably had discussion about, they were gonna do that.
yeah, they don't want or like rubber bullets, but again, I think they probably like maybe we shouldn't have like kids shooting guns at each other, but just
Right.
instead like yeah, the paintballs. And so the father was gonna kill his son. It seemed to me, and he's like his
Absolutely.
that's his son had was willing to go against him. He was thinking for himself. He became an independent thinker, and you can't
Hmm.
be an independent thinker if you're a fash.
No, you can't. You have to exterminate it, even if it means, exterminating your own son. Either literally by breaking them down as their own individual person, or by killing them.
Yeah, it's interesting how much I know that we talked about how the movie has that backdrop of World War II and fascism, but like the whole portion, I don't know how long, maybe it's only like 10 or 15 minutes of the movie with them in that fighting, the children fighting. Like it's it's extremely explicit to showing, war and fascism. But then I have to think to myself, like, is it that much different if you have, America, if it were like in America and you have Americans training to fight against whatever imagined evil? I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe that this going kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent.
Mm.
I was just thinking how it's like, is it? It fits into the historical context of this movie, but is it really that much different than
Blind patriotism that we're used to in the
Yeah, yeah,
military of like America, you could say, is very much a fascist organization.
right. Yeah, that's what I was
Absolutely.
trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. No, 100%. Like, our modern military, yeah, squashes out, individualism. You have to toe the line. If you do anything that is not in regs, you get reprimands for it. Or if you do something really extreme, like um, basically whistleblowing, you can get the book thrown at you because now you're going against the narrative. You're going against what's being taught to you. Those people who join the military, you were taught these are the enemies. Who are our enemies today? Iran, Russia, Venezuela, Syria, whatever. But if you present a different narrative, or if you are probably out loud like, actually, I don't like you're gonna hear it, and you're gonna be reprimanded for it. You're
Yeah,
gonna be punished for thinking, being an independent thinker.
yeah. And the other thing that kind of fits right in here, maybe not with sort of with the independent thinker like line is that so the Podesta basically meets his end because of what he did, and then soon after that you have the Count Volpe kind of returns to take back Pinocchio, and Spazzatura like kind of rebels against him as well. And you sort of have both like the capitalist and the fascist, getting what's coming to them
Yeah.
by the people who realize the exploitation that they felt. Like Spazzatura, like he goes against his boss, his owner. I think he refers to the Volpe refers to them as like slaves, like they're literally his
He does.
slaves.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's a nice touch that all the quote unquote bad people at this point kind of get their comeuppance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
I,
I think.
oh, go ahead.
No.
Well, I was going to say is that this is the part where you then I think that the Count Volpe dies, and then they end up all inside of the whale. Like the
Yeah.
odds of them all ending up inside of the same, whale. It's very much. It was part like the only part of the movie that I found like a little bit strange or just kind of like
hmm
an odd. That of all the ways that they would reunite his son and the father Geppetto and Pinocchio is inside of like the mouth of this giant beast. Maybe it goes back to what you said before, Ivan, is that like the whale or the beast kind of represents capitalism or the kind of imperialist system or whatever it might be, is that
These
within it
recurring
you're
forces.
yeah, exactly.
Right. And ultimately, no matter what we do, we're all going to meet in the belly of the beast, literally.
Yeah. And the only way they're able to escape it was, this working together, the plan they have for, Pinocchio's nose keeps growing because he's telling lies, which I thought was a kind of a funny little. It's like the tree is now growing, and they shoot out of
Yeah.
the blowhole of the beast and everything, and it's very much, yeah. It's I thought it was a cool way to do it, but then we see, Pinocchio dies, and this is where the uh uh his name, the cricket, Sebastian, uses his wish to bring him back, and it's this like beautiful moment. It's almost kind of ironic that he's like a mortal cricket brings back like the immortal person, which he will then have to watch him grow old and die, watch his father grow old and die. It's this very like circular tale of the idea of immortality. I don't know if you had any if you thought about the immoral nature of like Pinocchio in this and how it might play in.
Yeah, I think, all throughout the beginning of the story, Pinocchio is immortal and he is pure. But as he, was exposed to these things and eventually learned to think for himself and decide, well, because, yeah, we can equate the word pure to be like good, but maybe it's better to say that he was neutral, just like, again, like a baby, just sort of taking in information. But at the end, when he's revived, he basically is making a decision of all the wisdom that he's learned to be like, no, Geppetto is my father. This is my new family. We want to be good. We want to, move away from, people like the Podesta or the Count or Mussolini. We want to just live on our own and be good people. And, you know, once he's made that decision, because of Sebastian's wish, now Pinocchio is mortal. And I think that's reflective of what we have to do with our finite time on Earth, that we are all mortals. And, are we going to try to live in forever through this scam that is fascism? Because if you always listen to fascists, how they always talk about their regimes lasting forever, for 1,000,000 years, 1,000 years. They'll live on in glory. They'll be heroes, but it's all false idols.
Yeah.
When you have to accept that we are immortal beings and trying to build this fake glory will lead to your demise, as it always has for fascists.
Yeah, that's a good point, because anyone who promises this sort of like immortal, everlasting society of perfection, it should be just like immediate red flag. Like there is no immortality. There's always contradictions in your system, mistakes, failures, and they have this false sense of perfection. Going back to the statue, it's like this thing has to look this way, but like it can't. Like literally a
Right.
bomb can be dropped on top of this church and destroy your precious, you know, rocks, and so there is no the pursuit of perfection is also just like liberal idealism.
It's ultimately
Exactly. It is. It's trash and it is liberal idealism.
Yeah, I
You're
think
gonna say,
about
Cruz?
what's that?
No, I thought Cruz was gonna say something, but you were talking, so my bad. What were you saying?
Oh, go ahead.
What did you say? It was a trap or trash?
Trap.
Oh, trap.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought you said trash.
Like ideally trying to chase perfection, especially in a fascist sense, it's ultimately a trap because you're never, like you said, you're never going to achieve it. You can't achieve it, and no matter how much force or how much you destroy, how much you bomb, how much you lie, it's never going to be perfect. So ultimately, the system will collapse in on itself as people try to just be themselves, and all it takes is one person to start doing stuff like that to kind of inspire everyone else to do it.
Yeah, and it's also too, like you said, Ivan, before, is that there's always so much infighting within these groups because everyone has their own version of perfection. They're also all, especially given like specifically like German fascism in the 30s and 40s, is everyone is trying to make money on the side through, pharmaceuticals, like the whole like everything is, it's like you said, it's like an illusion of this facade of how, like, from the outside it seems very organized and regimented and all these things, but at the end of the day it's like this pile of shit within this little sheen
Yeah.
on the outside.
And it will
Exactly.
collapse, but it needs a push. People got to want to stop it.
Right.
Yeah.
And wanting to stop it also means you have to recognize your own, mortality. That's what basically what Huey P. Newton was writing about in Red Suicide. That if you're going to make a commitment to want to change or to fight against fascism, you also have to accept your very real mortality. And it's actually really funny because a lot of people who criticize socialist projects, communist projects, always talk about, you guys want a utopia, a perfect society, and it's like it's quite literally the opposite. It's fascism that strives for, again, this idea of perfection, this idea of mortality. We'll live forever. We'll have a 1,000-year Reich. That Reich lasts what? Not even 10 years, maybe. I don't even remember. Like something around that 10-year mark. Like
it's the classic, like, you try to critique socialism, but you end up describing capitalism.
Exactly.
Every time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's right. It's like I feel like I have this similar conversation of like, oh, the socialist ideas are utopian, or like this is like the idealist perspective, but it's liberalism that has this idea that you can just like somehow like wave a little wand and like do these little reform, whatever these things are, and somehow you'll get this things. But there's so many real world things that are happening that you can't just ignore reality. It's like ignoring the material conditions, the historical conditions, everything, class conditions.
Exactly. But as is the nature of fascism, just create your own reality, create your own perfection. Don't ever bother with facts.
Yeah, I think that's what Pinocchio. I don't know if he necessarily realizes at the end that he is not perfect, but I think you said is that he's not, immortal. There is a quality to life that you need to just live life as it comes. He's sees he has like the gravestones of his family, and he like kind of goes off because like I'm gonna now kind of like learn about society, actually like learn about the conditions and everything.
I mean, he actually gives up
Right.
essentially immortality towards the end, because like every time he dies, he just spends a little bit longer with that thing, but he gives that up to save. I think he gives it up to save Geppetto.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that's what's more important, is the immediate or the life around you and building a better life in the current rather than trying to live forever.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think even the closing line of the movie was something along the lines of like, whatever come, what may, some variation of that. basically being like, and us as as socialists, as anybody who's trying to organize a good revolution, we have to live our lives, whatever come what may. Like, we cannot predict what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or 5 years from now or in 50 years from now. But while we strive to organize and build our movements, we also have to take time for our families, our mental health, our life. Because what is the point of fighting against this apparatus, this machine, if we don't take care of the little bit of life that we do have?
Yeah. It's I didn't watch the credits, but I think the song that they play throughout the credits is also was like a pretty nice song. I didn't listen to the lyrics. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I tried to pull. I was trying to pull up the script to see that last line, and for some reason it's not.
I'm not
It's
even saying
not.
it wrong, but
No, it's fine. I for some reason, like sometimes when I look up the scripts online, I swear that it's sometimes the actual movie is slightly different because maybe they say a different line like in the movie. But yeah,
or they
either way.
improvise or something like that.
Yeah,
Different
or
takes.
like this isn't the official like the final script or who knows. I feel like it happens a lot where I'm like, wait, I can't find the line that I literally heard them say in the movie. But
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I know we kind of covered the whole like the plot and everything. I don't know if you had any um last thoughts about the movie or anything else you want to mention.
Yeah. I mean, just overall, I really liked it. I'm just seeing, and maybe that makes him. No, that's not the line. Sorry, I'm at. What happens happens. I found it,
Okay.
and then we are gone. There we go. Yeah. What
What happened
happens?
happens and
What happens happens, and then we are gone. Exactly. Like we're building our movement. We're doing what we're doing. We're doing this, going on podcasts. We're watching Pinocchio. We're living with our families, dealing with real problems. Well, and the whole point of us fighting against fascism or capitalism or imperialism is
Whatever it may be.
whatever it may be, and it's to make our lives better, to make our lives simpler. But like
Yeah.
you said, sort of to close it out, I really liked the movie. I thought it was really cute. I thought Sebastian's definitely my favorite character. I was really sad when he died.
It's definitely one of my
Especially
favorites last year.
he's just sort of splayed out on the windowsill, and Ewan McGregor's like, and I stopped moving, and I'm like, oh no, like,
Well, and he puts him in the little matchbox and he keeps him inside like his like heart literally, which
yeah,
I thought was like pretty like oh man, this is sad. This is very sad.
yeah, usually I guess the Disney-fied version is like, yay, we're
Happy
done,
ending.
but it's like Geppetto dies, the monkey dies, Sebastian dies, and Pinocchio's gonna die. Like, wow,
Hey, you're all gonna die. Just be nice to each other. Cool.
you're all gonna die. Crush fascism.
Yeah. Did you have any last thoughts, Bruce?
Everything that you said is pretty much where I lie. I would say ultimately it was probably one of my favorite movies of the last year. I've watched it multiple times, especially with my kids. My one kid is super into stop motion right now, so she loves turning this on. This and Coraline, so like just anything
Yeah.
of that nature. But a really unique interpretation of Pinocchio in a time period that I don't think enough people have considered.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously when you think of movies that take place during this time period, it's usually like a war movie,
Mhm.
or occasionally you might get like a kind of like a romantic type of film, perhaps, but with the
But
backdrop maybe during this era. But yeah, you don't usually get this kind of movie.
rarely is it just life within that society.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
and it influences things and it's part of what happens, but I think that's what makes his Del Toro's movie so good is that one of my favorite movies ever is Pan's Labyrinth, which I want to do at some point, and they have that
Yeah.
kind of backdrop too. Just he is a master at weaving in social and like social commentary plus the the historical context, which is yeah. I agree with both of you. I think this is a fantastic movie. I think it's for kids, but also not for kids at the same time. Like
I
kids can
saw
enjoy this.
I had seen like an interview or something with Guillermo del Toro, kind of a good closing point to that, whereas he was asked about making movies for kids and he said, I don't. I make movies and kids are smarter than you think. They'll get it. They'll get the point. And once you start making your films or writing stories where you treat kids as if they are smarter than a lot of times we give them credit for, then you get a movie like Pinocchio. The movie wasn't necessarily made for kids, but a kid can very much understand it still.
Yeah.
Even if they don't know the history and all that.
Yeah, it very much differs from like the idea of like, the Pixar movies, which are purely kids movies, but then they weave in like ideas and things that like adults would enjoy.
Right.
Which
is kind of the opposite.
Exactly. I almost feel like when in this podcast, in can't count how many episodes I say this, is that movies are they're trying to make money for a studio that's owned by millionaires trying to make more millions. And I kind of feel like this movie is one of the few times where I don't think he was making this movie to make money as like a
I mean, you said it yourself, like before the podcast, like the movie almost didn't get made because he ran out of money.
He ran out of money.
And people didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah, Netflix came in. The movie cost $35 million, which I'm amazed that they did this for $35 million, to be honest. And I think I saw that like just the actors didn't get paid that much, for this movie. It was most of the money went towards the production of it and everything. But yeah, it feels like he made this movie to make like a really good movie with a good plot and a good story and a good backdrop, and not just I'm going to try to make some movie that I know would sell millions. Like he could have made a different movie if he wanted to do that.
Yeah,
I appreciate
that. Kind of at a point in his career he doesn't have to anymore. He's probably
he's won Oscars,
money wise he's set. He didn't care.
Yeah, I think Guillermo is definitely top tier, and like you said, he really knows how to weave in a background and sort of include life things. There's actually another work of his I want to briefly talk about when we end the live. I won't bring it up here only because it's not movie related, but I would, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean he has lots of movies that I like to do. Someone mentioned doing A Shape of Water. Someone suggested that. I
actually haven't seen that.
Neither
I don't actually like. It's a good movie, but I feel like I'm gonna get people to be angry, but like I feel like it's kind of overrated as a movie.
Yeah. Anyone watching at this point will just be
but he has some like I love like Pan's Labyrinth is probably my favorite movie he's done. Like even like he did one of the Blade movies. I think the second one. It's also like pretty solid. I mean, he hasn't done that many movies, but when he does them, like they're on point. Even if I didn't love The Shape of Water, it's a good movie. So now I'm curious what you're gonna to mention. But yeah, so I think we kind of ran the gamut of what's in this, and we didn't really talk too much. Like Ron Perlman too, I think is a great. His voice acting in this movie is like top tier. He's in like I think almost every one of his movies, which is
also
perfect.
I like those director-actor relationships.
Yeah, and I think he plays himself. I think he's in the movie, not in this one, but he plays himself sometimes in movies, which is cool.
Yeah, he does stuff like that. No, the voice acting was all great. Chris Welch, too. Like I wasn't sure because I didn't look up the cast or anything until like pretty much just now. But like during the movie, and I was sort of listening to the tape, and I was like, man, this reminds me a lot of Glorious Bastards.
Oh, I love that movie. That's like one of my favorite Tarantino movies. But yeah, so I guess we've covered this movie as well done. But Companero Cruz and Ivan, New York Communers, thank you for coming on and
Sorry, I stepped away.
That's
You're good.
okay. I was thanking you. You have to stay here while I thank you for joining. It's been great. Been great talking about Pinocchio.
Been fun.
Yeah, it was great. We got to keep
Awesome.
doing it.
Yeah, and I think you can. I don't know if you want to say where people can find you. I'll put, should you wish people to find you online, I will make that easy for our listeners to do so.
Right now I'm fairly inactive online, but pretty much on every site, it's this name right here, Companero Cruz.
Yeah, same for me. Twitter or TikTok is Ivan De La Rosa, or you can say NY Communers. Right now, my TikTok is less than active. Currently working on another project right now with Cruz. So once that starts going, definitely start plugging that in. And yeah, thanks again, Evan.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great talking, and you've been listening to Left of the Projector. You can find the podcast on all places that podcasts could be found. And have a good one.
Thank you.
Fresh. Nice.
Nice.
I know, where'd he go?
I think we're still live.
Well. Now we can really put our
if everyone's still
agenda.
watching, I guess I'll see you later.
Yeah.
That was my bad.
Oh, wait,
there
he's
you
back.
I hit